They wanted to keep me there forever, but I mean, when the case went to England, you know what I mean?
For a controversial artist that has seen the good, the bad, and the ugly, Vybz Kartel has consistently found himself at the center of hateful encounters that have fought so hard to bring an end to his career and even life entirely.
Fighting illness, fighting for my freedom, fighting to keep my career on that level musically.
From an artist who fought so hard to ensure that he never came out of prison, to another artist who consistently took him for granted, even at the expense of his health, Vybz Kartel has called out 8 artists he hated the most. In this video, we'll be diving into the bitter stories that went down between these artists and him. So, sit tight and watch till the very end. Starting with number 8, Ninja Man.
With the Ninja Man thing, maybe I wouldn't have punched him, maybe I would have just kicked him. I don't know.
Jesus Christ, man.
Still some injury.
I don't know.
Way back in 2003, the Jamaican dancehall scene was a battlefield where respect was earned with lyrical dominance and public humiliation was a career-ending weapon. Vybz Kartel was still a rising force then, hungry, sharp, and determined to carve his name into an industry ruled by veterans who guarded power zealously. Ninja Man, the other hand, was already an established warlord of the culture, feared for his reputation, his influence, and his volatile presence on stage. Their collision was not accidental, it was inevitable. What truly caused the tension was generational friction. Kartel represented a new wave of dancehall, intellectual, calculating, and lyrically surgical. He was gaining attention for his wordplay and confidence, and his growing popularity began to threaten the old hierarchy. Ninja Man symbolized the old guard, an era where dominance was enforced not just by music, but by intimidation. Kartel's refusal to show deference, his boldness in lyrical clashes, and his willingness to challenge elders were seen as outright disrespect. Before the 2003 Sting Festival, there had already been murmurs of hostility between the two artists, because Kartel had been making statements through music and interviews that were interpreted as dismissive of older artists who, in his view, had failed to evolve, and Ninja Man became hostile towards Kartel for that. On the night of the festival, the atmosphere was charged long before either man touched the stage. The crowd came expecting lyrical warfare, but what unfolded went far beyond words. When Kartel and Ninja Man crossed paths on stage, the confrontation quickly escalated. What began as verbal hostility turned physical, shocking the audience and disrupting the show. According to Kartel, Ninja Man, who had grudges against him, got overly provoked and hit him first. He shared that being attacked by an established figure reinforced his belief that the industry was hostile to outsiders who refused to bow. It hardened him, sharpened his edge, and planted a lasting bitterness toward Ninja Man. Kartel viewed the clash not just as a fight, but as an attempt to silence and dominate him at a critical stage of his career. The hatred that followed from that moment at Sting 2003 has continued to linger in Kartel's heart for years. But that hatred is not as deep as the one he has for the next artist. Number 7, Bounty Killer.
Mavado, as a young artist at the time, was defending Bounty Killer, because remember, we were in the Alliance.
That's right.
When Kartel separated from the Alliance camp which Bounty Killer led, the silence that followed was quickly filled with rumors that painted him as a traitor who had betrayed the very group that helped elevate him. And according to Kartel, much of that story was shaped by Bounty Killer himself. Bounty Killer had positioned the Alliance as a brotherhood, a movement built on loyalty, mentorship, and collective rise. Kartel's departure threatened that image. Rather than allowing the split to be seen as creative independence or ideological difference, an alternative version of events began circulating in the streets and within industry circles. The story had it that Kartel had crossed an unforgivable line by stealing a group song and releasing it as a solo effort. That allegation spread fast, amplified by Bounty Killer's influence and credibility as a dancehall general, and the key implication was damaging.
Mavado, you know how dancehall is. I left the Alliance, turned around, fired some shots, and F that.
Being labeled as someone who stole from his own camp was worse than any lyrical insult. It reframed Kartel's exit as greed-driven and dishonest, casting him as someone who exploited the Alliance's creative pool for personal gain. The gossip placed Bounty Killer on the side of righteousness and Kartel on the side of betrayal. The streets rarely questioned the voice of a general, and so the story took root. Kartel's name became linked with disloyalty, and every move he made afterward was viewed through that lens. By framing Kartel's exit as unethical, Bounty Killer preserved his authority and justified the split to fans and insiders alike. It was a strategic move in an industry where perception often outweighs truth. The gossip hardened the divide between mentor and protege. What could have been remembered as a natural evolution became immortalized as betrayal. Kartel, now on his own path, had to struggle with carrying the weight of that accusation, while simultaneously building an empire that rivaled and eventually surpassed the shadow of the Alliance. The story of the stolen song became a dirt on his image, and the sad part was that once that story was released into the streets, it could never be taken back, and Bounty Killer caused it all. Speaking of great relationships gone sour, the next artist was another close one that did even worse to Kartel. Number 6, Mavado.
But we also have a saying that says, he who feels it, knows it. Knows it.
Knows it. Knows it.
Kartel and Mavado met while in the Alliance music camp. Their bond grew quickly, forged through music, ambition, and the sense that together they were unstoppable. They weren't just collaborators, they were seen as brothers in arms, pushing each other creatively and publicly representing the strength of the Alliance. For fans, their connection felt genuine, almost unbreakable. As Kartel's influence expanded and his persona grew more complex, cracks quietly began to form. Mavado's path was different, more calculated, more aligned with international crossover opportunities and a cleaner public image. Still, despite their differences, many believed that whatever storms came, loyalty would remain intact. That belief would be put to the ultimate test when Kartel's life took a dramatic and irreversible turn. When Kartel was imprisoned in 2011, the silence from Mavado was deafening. For someone who had once shared stages, studios, and inner circles with him, the absence felt less like distance and more like abandonment. There were no public signs of support, no visible attempts to visit, no gestures that suggested concern or solidarity. What made it more painful was how close they once were. This wasn't a casual friendship built on convenience. It was a relationship formed during the rise, when both were hungry, grinding, and leaning on each other. Kartel's imprisonment was not just a legal downfall, it was a moment when true allegiances were exposed, and in that moment, Mavado appeared to choose silence. To Kartel and his supporters, the lack of action felt calculated. Mavado's growing international profile and carefully managed image made association with an incarcerated, controversial figure risky. Standing beside Kartel would have meant standing against industry pressure, media narratives, and potential backlash. Instead, Mavado seemed to prioritize self-preservation over brotherhood. Over time, the silence became part of the story. Whether intentional or circumstantial, it shaped how their relationship would be remembered. Kartel's world shrank to prison walls, while Mavado's expanded onto global stages. Their paths, once intertwined, now moved in opposite directions. Kartel said he expected loyalty from someone he once called close. What he received instead was distance from Mavado, and it hurt too deep. Number 5, Masika. After Kartel was imprisoned in 2011, even some artists he didn't pay much attention to began to target his legacy using whispers. Among those whispers were rumors involving Masika, a younger, highly skilled lyricist whose rise coincided with Kartel's incarceration. Rumors had it that Masika was pleased that Kartel was behind bars, not out of personal hatred, but because Kartel's dominance, influence, and strict control over protégés were no longer factors. Kartel had a reputation for shaping artists closely under his wing, and the idea being spread was that with him imprisoned, emerging acts like Masika could finally move freely, without guidance, pressure, or limitation. Whether true or exaggerated, the rumor struck a nerve. The tension escalated publicly in 2016 when Masika released the diss track Wake Up. The song wasn't subtle. In it, Masika portrayed Kartel as a disloyal artist and even painted him as someone who refused to be controlled or manipulated. According to Kartel, hearing such comments about him was not new. From the very beginning of his career, he has remained an advocate that young artists should be allowed to be independent and not subject to control. However, the one that got to him was the provocative claims that started circulating around that Kartel had allegedly begged Masika for a collaboration, an assertion that directly challenged Kartel's image as the gatekeeper, not the seeker. Kartel shared that hearing this from behind prison walls was especially infuriating. He couldn't respond freely, couldn't enter the booth at will, and couldn't confront the narrative in real time. Those rumors felt like a calculated strike at a moment of vulnerability. It fed into the perception that Masika was capitalizing on Kartel's silence, using his imprisonment as a shield to speak boldly, and it was one of the worst things ever done to Kartel by an artist. Number 4, Beenie Man. The conflict between Vybz Kartel and Beenie Man is rooted in one of the most sacred and fiercely guarded titles in Jamaican music, King of Dancehall. This was never a casual disagreement or a momentary lyrical clash. It was a prolonged war of legacy, relevance, and dominance that stretched across generations, fueled by ego, history, and an unyielding refusal from either side to step aside. Beenie Man earned his crown through decades of work, international success, and cultural impact. Long before Kartel became a household name, Beenie Man was already cemented as a dancehall giant, representing Jamaica on global stages and carrying the title with pride. To him, the crown was not symbolic. It was earned, defended, and non-negotiable. Any challenge to it was seen not as competition, but as disrespect. Kartel's rise disrupted that certainty. Unlike traditional challengers, Kartel did not wait for permission or gradual acceptance. He declared himself king through dominance, flooding the streets with hits, controlling trends, shaping slang, and influencing an entire generation. His confidence was unapologetic, and his supporters echoed his claims loudly. To Beenie Man, this wasn't homage, it was an attempted takeover. The tension simmered for years, occasionally surfacing in interviews, stage comments, and subliminal lyrical shots. But as Kartel's influence grew, even while imprisoned, the rivalry refused to die. In fact, Kartel's continued dominance from behind bars intensified the conflict. To many, it suggested that the throne no longer belonged to whoever held the microphone on stage, but to whoever commanded the culture itself. In recent years, Beenie Man escalated the situation by releasing diss tracks aimed directly at Kartel. These songs were not just attacks on Kartel's character or career, they were declarations of ownership. Beenie Man positioned himself as the rightful ruler, defending his legacy against what he viewed as revisionist history. The message was clear: popularity does not equal kingship, and incarceration does not erase hierarchy. From Kartel's perspective, these diss tracks felt unnecessary and insecure. To him and his supporters, the numbers, influence, and cultural grip spoke louder than titles handed down by predecessors. Kartel didn't need official recognition. The streets had already crowned him. Every diss from Beenie Man was interpreted as proof that the old guard felt threatened by the new order. And so, the war over the crown continues, not just in music, but in memory and influence. 2 kings, 1 throne, and a culture that refuses to settle the debate. And neither Beenie Man nor Vybz Kartel has ever been willing to surrender. Number 3, Sean Paul.
I was literally fading away. Like literally, I couldn't, even when I came out, I couldn't do 40 seconds, Lisa, on a treadmill.
Sean Paul and Vybz Kartel once existed in the same era, but occupied very different lanes in dancehall. For years, their coexistence felt balanced, almost respectful. But that balance shifted after Kartel was imprisoned, and with it came a quiet but damaging sense that Kartel was being taken for granted. With Kartel behind bars, the industry began to move differently around his name. His absence from stages, interviews, and award shows created the illusion of decline. To some, it appeared that Kartel's era was fading, that time and incarceration would slowly erode his relevance. In that atmosphere, Sean Paul's posture toward Kartel began to feel dismissive, not openly hostile, but distant and indifferent, as if Kartel's legacy no longer demanded acknowledgement. The perception grew that Sean Paul benefited from Kartel's silence. With one of dancehall's most dominant voices physically removed from the scene, the global spotlight had fewer internal rivals. Kartel could no longer compete in the traditional sense, and this absence allowed others to speak more freely, move more comfortably, and define dancehall's international face without challenge. In that space, Kartel's contributions were increasingly treated as history rather than a living force. What made this sting was not direct disrespect, but omission. Kartel's name was rarely invoked when conversations turned to influence, innovation, or the modern evolution of dancehall. The silence suggested that because Kartel was imprisoned, his cultural authority had expired. To Kartel and his supporters, this felt like being written off prematurely, like the industry assumed prison had reduced him to a footnote. Yet, the irony was impossible to ignore. Even from behind bars, Kartel's music continued to dominate, inspire, and shape new artists. His presence lingered in slang, sound, and style. The streets still spoke his name, but internationally, where Sean Paul thrived, Kartel's influence was treated as less urgent, less relevant, and easier to overlook. This perceived disregard reinforced Kartel's long-held belief that the industry respects convenience more than contribution. When you can show up, you are celebrated. When you cannot, you are slowly erased. Sean Paul, intentionally or not, became symbolic of that erasure, someone who moved forward while acting as though Kartel's chapter was closing. Taking Kartel for granted meant underestimating the permanence of his impact, and Kartel started hating Sean Paul for that. Number 2, Spraga Benz.
13 years out of prison. Yep. Getting nominated for the album that I did in prison. Coming out, getting a US visa, walking the red carpet.
After 13 years in prison, Kartel got released. However, while in prison, he wrote songs, recorded, and released them. According to him, he had his family members depending on him, and that was his push to keep putting out music. From behind concrete walls and locked doors, Kartel maintained a level of productivity that shocked the industry and challenged the idea that incarceration could erase influence. His story became one of survival, discipline, and relentless work. It was in this context that Spraga Benz's comments landed like a spark on dry grass. Spraga downplayed Kartel's artistry, suggesting that Kartel's continued relevance had less to do with talent and more to do with public sympathy. The implication was clear, that Kartel's popularity was fueled by pity for his prison ordeal rather than genuine musical ability. In an industry built on respect and credibility, that claim cut deep. For Kartel, this wasn't just criticism, it was dismissal of years of effort under extreme circumstances. Writing and releasing music from prison required planning, mental strength, and an unbreakable focus. Kartel saw his success as earned, not gifted by sympathy. To him, the fans responded not because they felt sorry for him, but because the music still resonated, still sounded current, and still carried truth. Kartel pushed back by framing his journey as authentic and hard-won. He emphasized that his story was real, marked by responsibility, pressure, and survival. Supporting family from prison wasn't a narrative device. It was a lived reality that forced him to stay sharp and productive. In his view, no amount of sympathy could sustain dominance for over a decade without consistent output and cultural relevance. The tension also exposed deeper insecurities within dancehall's hierarchy. Kartel's continued success disrupted expectations. Prison was supposed to silence him, yet it amplified his myth. For critics like Spraga, this contradiction was uncomfortable. The idea that someone could be physically confined yet artistically free challenged traditional measures of success and talent. Kartel interpreted Spraga's comments as jealousy rather than honest critique. From his perspective, it was easier to reduce his achievements to pity than to accept that he had outworked, outlasted, and out-influenced many artists who were free the entire time. The resentment, as Kartel saw it, came from watching someone thrive in conditions meant to destroy them. Till date, Kartel feels really bad that Spraga framed him as a beneficiary of sympathy, despite being proof that discipline, pressure, and purpose can outshine circumstance. Number 1, Lady Saw.
But the formula is there, and I try to impart that to the kids that I speak to, the young artists.
One thing Kartel has always spoken about is creating music with passion, the kind that bleeds through the lyrics, the rhythm, and the delivery. To him, music was never just sound, it was emotion, hunger, pain, and truth fused together. Every song had to feel lived in, as if the artist had poured their soul into the recording booth. This philosophy shaped how he judged not only himself, but everyone around him, including Lady Saw. Kartel's resentment toward Lady Saw was rooted less in rivalry and more in disappointment. In his view, she possessed undeniable talent, experience, and status, yet failed to fully surrender herself emotionally to the music. He believed her approach had become mechanical, focused on shock value, performance, and routine rather than raw feeling. To Kartel, that lack of emotional depth made her music feel hollow, as if it existed without a pulse. From Kartel's perspective, longevity without evolution was a problem. He saw dancehall as a living, breathing culture that demanded constant emotional reinvention. Artists had to feel the moment, channel the streets, and translate real energy into sound. Kartel felt that Lady Saw relied too heavily on formulas that once worked, repeating themes without digging deeper. To him, that repetition stripped the music of soul. This belief fueled a quiet but intense disdain. Kartel didn't just want hits. He wanted music that hurt, healed, provoked, and lingered. He prided himself on emotional honesty, even when it made him vulnerable or controversial. Seeing someone with Lady Saw's influence, yet what he perceived as emotional detachment, frustrated him deeply. In his mind, it was a waste of platform. The issue wasn't skill, it was commitment. Kartel believed passion separates entertainers from artists. Without passion, music becomes empty noise, disconnected from the people it's meant to represent. He felt Lady Saw performed dancehall rather than lived it, delivering songs without fully embodying their emotional weight. That disconnect, in his eyes, was unforgivable in a genre born from struggle and expression. Anyone who treated music casually, especially someone at the top, became a symbol of what he despised. This resentment was ideological. Kartel viewed passion as sacred. Music without soul, no matter how popular, meant nothing to him. And in his worldview, refusing to pour your full self into your art was the ultimate betrayal of dancehall's spirit. He believed Lady Saw treated music as performance alone. And for Kartel, that difference was enough to turn respect into contempt, and that was enough reason to hate her, just like the other 7 listed before her. Let's know your thoughts in the comments section. Subscribe to this channel for more videos like this, like and share.